Most of us, as we get older, have a bit more time to think of things, and they are not always things of particularly great value. Indeed, sometimes we might have more time on our hands than is good or healthy, especially after retirement. Did you know that today is Grandparents' Day? And I suspect that Grandparents' Day is an occasion created by the greeting card companies and florist associations to build up the market for their products. Be that as it may, I took Grandparents' Day, combined it with some observations regarding advancing age and retirement, and thought I would share with you a few thoughts sent to me by Shirley Brinson, which I think will start us off, at least in a good humor. The piece is entitled, Ramblings of a Retired Mind. I was thinking about how a status symbol of today is those cell phones that everyone has clipped to his or her belt or purse. I can't afford one, so I'm wearing my garage door opener. I also made a cover for my hearing aid, and now I have what they call blue teeth, I think. You know, I spent a fortune on deodorant before I realized that people didn't like me anyway. I was thinking that women should put pictures of their missing husbands on beer cans. I thought about making a fitness movie for folks my age and call it Pumping Rust. Employment application blanks always ask who is to be notified in case of an emergency. I think you should write, a good doctor. A penny saved is a government oversight. Got to think about that one. The older you get, the tougher it is to lose weight because by then your body and your fat have gotten to be really good friends. The easiest way to find something lost around the house is to buy a replacement. he who hesitates is probably right. Did you ever notice the Roman numerals for the number 40 is XL? If you can smile when things go wrong, you have someone in mind to blame. The sole purpose of a child's middle name is so he can tell when he is really in trouble. Did you ever notice when you put the two words the and IRS together, they spell theirs? Aging. Eventually you will reach a point where you stop lying about your age and start bragging about it. Some people turn back their odometers, not me. I want people to know why I look this way. I've traveled a long distance and some of the roads weren't paved. And when you are dissatisfied and would like to go back to your youth, think about algebra. I mentioned Grandparents' Day. Today is also the beginning of our new church year. Hence, we have gone back to the usual order of worship format. The choir has returned. We are wearing robes. Sunday school is starting again. So what do the two, observations on aging and starting up again, have to do with each other? In addition to just wanting to have some fun with you, I would suggest that as we, the members and friends who comprise the chapel, look ahead to the future, we want to make sure that we do so with youthful hearts and outlooks, and not as those who, with a kind of aging retirement attitude, insist on keeping everything status quo because that's the way we've always done it. We live in a changing world, and this is especially so perhaps regarding organized religion. Particularly in the Western world, more and more people are turned off by church at the very same time that they claim to be spiritual. Secularism, by and large, rules the day. So what is the future of the church, at least in the West, and certainly as it currently exists and operates? The prognosis is not good. To be sure, there are mega churches all over, especially in the United States, some with thousands of members. But when the numbers of all those who are involved with church are added up, they are dwarfed by the numbers of those who have nothing to do with church. And when so many churches are little more than glorified entertainment centers, which must keep crowds of people coming in the front door because the same numbers are going out the back door, well, you can see the problem. For so long, the church's primary approach has been like the scenario offered in the movie Field of Dreams. Build it, and they will come. In the film, Kevin Costner builds a baseball diamond on his farm next to a cornfield. And magically, famous baseball players, some long deceased, come out to play ball. And when they come, so do the spectators. For much of its history, that has been the church's way. It has built a building and developed a program and waited for the folks to arrive. Well, it's not working so well anymore. For some reason, I have long received Ministry, the monthly magazine of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Last September, there was an intriguing article by Jan Paulsen, the denomination's retired president and a Norwegian by birth. In it, he spoke about the problem I have just mentioned and what one Norwegian congregation is doing in response. And that congregation's discovery somewhat mirrored what I have observed as I have considered the church's position and the chapel's future. As in Norway, a very secular nation, many Americans are interested in the Bible, hence the success of movies about Noah's Ark and the Exodus, as well as television shows along similar lines. But the movies and the shows are, to at least some extent, fictionalized action dramas, and the interest in them does not represent an evangelical awakening. Rather, people who don't go to church but are interested in Scripture and spirituality see the Bible as a part of their literary and historical heritage and the church as a place to go to meet special needs like weddings and funerals. So there's the dilemma. How can the church witness to the power of a living God in a society which has largely consigned Christianity and religion in general to the realm of history, of literature, of expediency, and peopled by the very naive? In the words of Paulsen, how can we speak compellingly of the Christ of Scripture when the language of Christian faith has such a quaint, anachronistic sound to the secular ear? How do we reach men and women whose interest in Christianity, if they have any at all, more likely stems from abstract curiosity rather than spiritual seeking? In short, how can we make the gospel alive and real for those who see Christianity as unreal and irrelevant? What we church folks face from non-church church folks is not usually outright hostility or or total disinterest. Instead, it is the fact that a faith which actively shapes life is alien to the postmodern outlook. So there's at least part of our goal. Figure out how to authentically communicate God's salvation to the deeply skeptical, humanistic mind. Is any of this easy? Of course not. We are all to some extent set in our ways. We like what has worked for us and indeed has worked for our churches for centuries. But a nostalgia-driven approach is more often than not an exercise in futility and self-indulgence. So we've got to be true to our beliefs and our mission without necessarily embracing every method of yesterday for the contexts of today. In this regard, Ellen White, the founder of Seventh-day Adventism, had it right when she advised, "We cannot be accepted or honored of God in rendering the same service or doing the same works that our fathers did in order to be accepted and blessed of God as they were. We must imitate their faithfulness and zeal, improve our light as they improved theirs, and do as they would have done had they lived in our day. We must walk in the light which shines upon us, otherwise the light will become darkness." In reading Powells Sins' article, I was heartened to find that much of what he suggests we in and as the chapel are already doing, although of course we could always do it better and more of it. He speaks of positioning the church as a community hub, which offers what is not always readily available elsewhere in the community and meets a wide variety of interests and needs through programs like our Monday Night Non-Trivial Pursuits, what that program has provided. He speaks of the church as being an open-door entity rather than a private religious enclave, an entity which welcomes all into its programming and deliberately plans that programming so that it is genuinely welcoming and friendly, warm and inclusive. He speaks of the church as being accepting of new ideas and approaches, and not being judgmental toward and dismissive of those who see things differently. One thing which rang a bell with me as I read Powells Sins' piece was his observation that most churches, certainly ours, invest heavily in meeting the needs of those in the community who are needy and marginalized. As we do, for example, with our annual outreach budget, our Good Samaritan Fund, our Beach Walk, our Stop Hunger Now involvement, our Orange Suitcase emphasis, our Tampa Bay Harvest participation, our financial response to tragedies and catastrophes whenever and wherever they occur. But what about the needs of those who live in an affluent society, as so many people in our community do? How does one get through with a spiritual message to those who, well-educated and financially comfortable, think they have everything they need, but really don't? Every secular paradise has at least an occasional crack in its utopian facade. Even well-off people, those who possess so much, experience sickness and death and discord and unhappiness. Even at the top of the social ladder, where technology and affluence tend to transform the way people interact with one another, there can be a longing for authentic relationships in the midst of feelings of isolation. And in a world that is so rapidly changing, anyone and everyone can feel shame when exposed to prejudices and biases they thought they did not possess, as they are confronted by those who are so different and hence so difficult to understand. So, let me present 4 questions which I hope can help form a framework for action by the chapel as we move into the future. Actions which will hopefully help us to more fully connect with people who may inactively reject more traditional methods of church outreach and indeed the church itself as we walk in the light which shines upon us today. Do we have an extroverted or an introverted mindset? It was 12th century German theologian and Christian martyr Dietrich Bonhoeffer who advised the church is the church only when it exists for others. That says that our true reason for being is to serve those who are not members. A look at our programming and our budget should give us a good idea regarding whose needs we are trying to meet, as well as how we are trying to meet them. An introverted mentality prioritizes the comfort of church members and expects others to adapt to our culture and learn our faith language before they can extract anything of value. An extroverted mentality explores how to configure our approach and language so that our church will be a place where non-members can feel at home. An introverted mentality tends to view outreach as a sortie into enemy territory. An extroverted mentality wants to meet the people of the community on their terms and meet their needs. And there is certainly good precedence for such an approach. According to John, before going to the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus spoke with God about his disciples, saying, I am not asking you to take them out of the world. As you have sent me into the world, so I have sent them into the world. Obviously, then, that's where we too belong, in the world. Second question, are we offering something of value? Too often we assume that what we value, everyone else will. But even if something has value, it must be perceived to have value by the receiver before it will be appreciated. So we've got to understand the real identity and know the real needs of our community in order to make a beneficial impact. That's what Jesus did. He intimately and compassionately engaged with them in the day-to-day struggles of the people of the community and shaped his language, his stories, his miracles, his actions, so those spoke directly to the men and women that he encountered. Does our outreach also speak to and meet with people where they are rather than where we would like them to be? Are we prepared to stand in the cracks of society and offer something that corresponds to its felt needs? Third question, are we powered up for the long term? We will not be able to accomplish much of value if all the ideas we implement and all the actions we take come from a handful of people who we might identify as the church leaders, professional or lay, elected or otherwise. There has to be a buy-in by the entire membership, or at least most of it. And what we do must correspond to the talents and enthusiasm of that membership. I'm talking about you, all of you, as you with me explore where we go and what we do to do our job and fulfill our mission. Beyond that, we must look at the long-term sustainability of our programming, because outreach to postmoderns is usually not a speedy process. So we need more than standalone events that come about in short-term bursts of inspiration and excitement. That's why our ongoing involvement, for example, in working with organizations like Religious Community Services, RCS, and the Homeless Empowerment Project, HEP, and the Clearwater Beach Chamber of Commerce is so important, not just in one-shot spurts, but on a regular basis. And question number 4, is our outreach authentic? A secular postmodern man or woman can smell a sales pitch from miles away. So before we can hope to accomplish anything of worth, we've got to build genuine relationships with people and groups outside our own organization. Trust is difficult to create and easy to destroy, so we've got to prove that we really care. And we prove that we really care by being involved with folks on a regular basis and in ways that have nothing to do whatsoever with our agenda. We don't achieve anything by trying to convince people of the rightness of our message, force them to conform their beliefs and behavior to what we consider acceptable standards, and then embrace them into our group. Rather, we freely enfold them into the warmth of our fellowship, regardless of where they are on their spiritual journeys, by demonstrating, as did Jesus, an overwhelming concern and compassion for people, and not for dogmas or doctrines or denominations. And we begin by being with them where they are, engaged in what is important to them. Authenticity is everything, and it is imperative that we try to read the unique pulse of our community as we strive to understand the specific fears and hopes and needs that drive the men and women around us. Fears and hopes and needs that undoubtedly drive us as well. In our scripture reading from Matthew, we found the women going to the tomb and discovering that it was empty. Jesus was no longer there. Instead, the angels told them where he had gone and where he would meet them, a message which Jesus himself later confirmed. And when he did meet with them, his followers, he gave them instructions to go into the world. Jesus did not wait in the tomb for the world to come to him, nor did he tell his disciples to build churches and formulate theology and set services and open doors so that people could flock to where they were. No, he told them to go out there where the people were, work with them, and primarily through example, bring them the good news. Is that a message we hear and implement? Are we ready to fill in the cracks that exist in our community? I can't do it alone. Your church board can't do it alone. Those who have been serving and doing for years can't do it alone. But together, all of us together, well,